Welcome to episode 11 of the Confident Carnivore podcast, where our motto is change your fuel, change your life. Today's guest is Becky Niles. Hi, Becky.
Yes,
Welcome to the show.
thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's a great day.
All right, and you're in Nebraska, right?
I am in Nebraska and the weather was great. Sun was shining. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
lovely.
great day here.
Awesome. Well, just to tell you a little bit about Becky, she is one of the beloved MeatRx coaches. So if you haven't heard about the MeatRx community, it's a large community of carnivores led by Dr. Shawn Baker. And Becky is one of the coaches who you'll see pretty much every day of the week. We call her the Queen of Fat, which you'll learn more about why we call her that. She does use a high fat carnivore approach. So this will be really insightful to talk to her about how she came upon that and what she experiences on the high fat approach. Becky's also, we like to call her the data nerd because she is somebody who has methodically tracked her progress. She does track her daily metrics. And so we're going to probably hear more about that. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and share some of Becky's before and after photos, just so you can kind of get a sense of where she has been at on her journey. So Becky, if you want to just say a couple words about this collage here.
So that is the first picture there is 2002. That's after I ended up and had my first kid. And I never really lost the weight after her. I ended up and always kind of carried it around with me. That 2013 is still 5 years. You can kind of see my youngest there in the yellow. But that's 5 years after having her. So I was still, pretty heavy. I ended up topping out at up there in between 2013 2018. I bounced around between like 180 and about 212. It topped out, for me, about 210, 215 was kind of where I hit my upper limit. And then I ended up, that 2018 picture, you can't really see it very well, but I ended up and I had a lot of like Spanx on in that picture. That was our family pictures.
Uh,
Took those pictures, hated them. I never ended up and actually got any of them printed. So,
wow.
but then there in the bottom was just this last February, after losing 50 pounds, wearing the same shirt. You can see I have it tied there in the middle. And in that top picture, it was tight on me. So like I said, I've lost 50 plus pounds doing high fat approach for carnivores. So
Wow. And Becky, how tall are you?
I'm 5'8".
Oh, wow. You're tall. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's just cruise through a couple more pictures here. Hopefully, I don't know which order I'm going in, but it's not letting me advance here. Oh, here we go. So, yeah, we can see you. Oh, you're definitely got the carnivore glow here. And there's that before and pretty dramatic after there. Okay. And more carnivore. Yep. All right. So let's go ahead and
That's vacation. And actually I had a hysterectomy too, 10 years ago. So I ended up and battled with losing weight, gaining, hormonal issues. And you can really see in that before picture on that one where I was gaining a lot of weight in my midsection.
Yeah, we can see that, huh? Okay. So before we dive in to talking to Becky, let's go ahead and just see a couple more resources here. So I'm going to start here with this is Becky's written success story on the MeterX podcast or platform, excuse me. And then you can watch her success story here as well. And then this is her coaching profile. So you can see she talks about her approach. She's definitely, like I said, a very popular coach at MeterX, especially for folks who are interested in the high fat approach. She's had great success on it, as we're going to hear more about. And Becky actually hosts a lot of the meetings. So you can see this is the MeterX weekly calendar. Becky hosts the Eat Fat and Thrive on Monday, the weekly Meaty Monday Motivation. And then on Tuesday, you co-host, right, the weekly carnivore
Yep.
fasting. And Wednesday, she co-hosts the, right, it's a
I host the
co-host.
weight
Oh,
loss.
you,
I host
oh,
the
the
weight loss
evening.
meeting. Yep.
Yeah, she hosts the weekly weight loss meeting in the evening. And then Thursday, she co-hosts the weekly fasting and feasting and the weekly carnivore for beginners, correct? All
Correct.
right. So yeah, Becky's very active, as you can see. While she is a coach, she gives away so much coaching daily, just always helping so many people with where they're at on their carnivore journeys from beginner to advanced. So you can pretty much see her every day on the platform, and I do. And then here is Becky's Instagram. She does have Becky Niles Carnivore and EO, which is essential oils, right, Becky?
Correct.
And I love her posts because, it's a combination of delicious foods. You're going to probably hear a little bit more about certain carnivore foods that she's known for, like her famous beef uh, crack, which her famous beef crack and her tallow sticks. So she really teaches you how to get a lot of fat in. And you can see we call her the data nerd because she does crunch her daily macros. And then lastly, before we dive into talking to Becky, she does have her own YouTube channel. You can see she is known for having some famous recipes like her carnivore waffles, her whipped tallow fatty coffee, the carnivore crisp bread, and oh, I see pemmican here. But she's also very well known for her whipped tallow sticks. Oh, and last but certainly not least, Becky's beef rack, which is basically fried beef fat, which makes it extra savory and delicious. So I'm sure she'll tell us more about that later. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into talking to Becky and hearing more about her healing journey and how she ended up being a high fat carnivore coach. So to start, Becky, can you tell us how old you are and how long you've been carnivore?
I am 39. I will be 40 in about nine days. Well, the 7th of April. So a week, a little over a week and a half. But I ended up and started carnivore 2.5 years ago. Started in 2018. Right? 18? Yeah, sure. Somewhere in there. Anyway, it's been 864 days. Let me put it that way.
Wow.
That I ended up and started. And I was keto 3 years prior to that. So I've been low carb for 5 years.
Wow. And so what drew you to keto?
So I ended up and I constantly struggled, like I said, when we were going through those pictures. I had a complete hysterectomy 10 years ago. So I wasn't even 30 years old and complete. And then the hormone replacement therapy made me sick. So wasn't balancing hormones with therapy. I was, kind of just muddling my way through, and of course had, issues losing weight, would try all sorts of things, anywhere from Weight Watchers to calories in, calories out, move more. It just never really worked. I mean, it would work, but then anytime you changed or stopped or anything like that, the weight come right back. And so it was definitely this yo-yoing. And I was hosting the Weight Watcher meeting. So I've been in, kind of the weight loss mantra for many years. And I was hosting our local one. The local Weight Watchers shut down, and I knew there had to be more, and I was only doing like salads and those type of things. And that's when the keto come into play. And when I first started keto, it was true whole foods keto. It wasn't, these processed, but it turned into that as my keto years went on, because of convenience. It was purely convenience. And it really derailed me. And so then I just kind of, being a Nebraska girl right in the middle of beef country, I ended up did some fasting. That's when, like Redmond's come out, and there was many great influencers that did fasting. So I do fasting, but it just started this really unhealthy cycle for me, because I would end up in fast, 72 hours, 96 hours. And then when I went to refeed, it was like full on binge. I would break it properly, broth, soft foods, those type of things. But when I ended up and continued, it was like my body just couldn't get the nutrients and the, nourishment that it needed after fasting that long. Also, you factor in their unbalanced hormones, thyroid issues, pre-diabetic. So, you know, blood sugars going haywire, up and down and roller coaster, causing more cravings. So I really dealt with a lot of that. And I ended up stumbling upon Shawn. And that's when I'm like, here he is eating ribeyes at the time. I mean, he still eats it predominantly red meat, but I'm like, I can do this, and it was like November-ish. And so I kind of stayed keto, on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then went full on in, both feet in, wished on for World Carnivore Month in January, and loved it. Ended up, and I'm like, I can do it for 30 days, 30 days has now turned in, like I said, 864 days later.
Wow.
Love it. I felt the difference by pulling the vegetables out. But as you said, I am the data nerd. So I tracked my ketones, I tracked my glucose when I was keto. And then, I did lose a little bit of weight, but I never really got to a comfortable weight. I still carried a lot in that midsection. So I knew I had, I was still borderline like Hashimoto's, my thyroid levels were off. I was just still dealing with a lot of stuff. But when I come to carnivore, what really set me into the high fat side of things was my glucose and my ketones went completely out of whack because I was eating a lot of meat. I just never felt satiated. And I knew from doing keto, I did, the traditional high fat, moderate protein, low carb keto. And when I ended up coming to carnivore and seeing my numbers, that's when I ended up and did my first CGM to see what was going on in that 24-hour period. I was, anywhere between like 180 and 200 for glucose, which was super high because normally I was down like 70s, 80s. So I started to really reel in the protein, kept the fat up. So I switched from doing a lot of like ribeyes, chuck eyes, brisket, pork butt, the fatty cuts of meat. And I did in the beginning keep dairy in there. I have since pulled dairy out because it is problematic for me. But I ended up and I used a lot of the dairy. So heavy whipping cream, sour cream, cream cheese, the traditional fat sources when you're keto for like fat bombs and those type of things, butter. I ended up and I switched and started using those even more, pulled the protein back, and my numbers started to get better. And so I stuck with that for a good year. And like I said, I lost my weight doing high fat,
Wow.
changed body comp. And I've just stuck with it. I feel better. My, lab work all looks better, the numbers, the metrics. So I'm hooked on the high fat, but
So when you say high fat, what percentage are we talking about of fat to protein?
typically I don't go below like 85% fat.
Oh,
I'm currently right now sitting about 90% fat to 10% protein. Now, let me stop and say I do feel protein is important, and getting a sufficient amount of protein for, any of your listeners that may be listening, I do feel protein is important for building the muscles. So I do put my macros out there. It's very individualized, so they can't necessarily follow my macros.
Mhm.
They really kind of either need to, schedule a coaching session. I can kind of help them with that. But really figuring out what works
Mhm.
as far as their macros, their activity level, those type of things.
So when you do coach people, you don't always gear them toward super high fat then. It just, like you say, it depends on the person then.
Yep, it depends on their goals, and it depends, if they're looking for hormone type, if they're dealing with hormones, whether it be thyroid, adrenals, um, you know, estrogen type issues of hormones, even for men that are imbalanced in testosterone, the higher fat can end up in work.
Mhm.
Um, or even, for me, it even helped my glucose numbers. And I've worked with many type 1 and type 2 diabetics that have done the higher fat approach, and they really get the stability. Um, like I
Wow.
said, even as type 1s, I've known a couple of my coaching clients that have been able to actually cut their insulin usage by like 60%.
Wow.
So
Incredible.
it's huge for them.
So when you were testing things out and you were noticing that, you were trying to regulate your own numbers, how did you just gradually start increasing the fat because you noticed your numbers would get a little better until you got all the way up to that 90%? How long did it take you to figure that out, that hey, my numbers, like, did you just go for it and go, I need more fat? How did that play out?
Well, so I knew what my macros were from keto. And so I kind of went back to those, but pulled, the 20 grams of carbs that I was having
Oh,
completely out. So it it did kind of equal the same amount, but now I'm sure you've probably heard of the reverse dieting, where you increase your calories to end up and actually increase your metabolic rate. And so even though when I was doing keto, because when you hit the same macros on a day after day after day, your body gets used to that. It's very smart, and it will get used to that. So it isn't going to burn any more, it isn't going to burn any less. And so that's why I kept stalling. And then, ultimately I also was falling off the wagon when I was keto. But I ended up and I went back to what macros I knew worked,
mm,
and that was the high fat, moderate protein. And so I brought that over, but yet it still wasn't enough, in my opinion, calories to make it really sustainable long term. And that's what I was looking for. So, I ended up and I did slowly increase the calories, um, to where now I'm eating, well over 2,000 calories in a day and not gaining weight. I'm actually, to the point where with my high fat, I can end up and actually lose, but, it wasn't, all in the beginning. When some people end up and they do it a little too fast. They may end up and gain, or they may have, a lot of things that are out of whack that need a little bit of regulation. And so they have to really focus on that healing. And my healing has still continued,
mhm.
even 2 years, in. So I
Wow.
still don't feel that I'm 100% healed, um, from, everything that I was dealing with prior, but it's definitely, 98% improved. There's
Wow.
only a couple things that are, out of whack still, but
Amazing. Before we talk about what actually healed and how, when you went from keto to the high fat carnivore, you said basically the macro ratio stayed the same, but do you think the critical difference was taking out the little bit of carbs then, in terms of your ability to not have cravings and your body's ability to do what it needed to do then to lose weight, to heal? Is it just that small amount of carbs of keto that messes everything up, or are there other factors?
Well, I do feel it was those little amount of carbs because for me, just the few maybe anti-nutrients that I was getting through, the vegetables, was problematic. It was creating toxins within me that were really battling, more on that cellular level, the oxalates, those type of things, that were preventing the full healing from happening. Um, I do feel that the higher fat has also helped me stay on track and prevent me from, falling off track and binging um, into, sugar-filled foods or carbs or anything like that, because the higher fat does provide this satiety factor.
Mhm.
And it also, like I said, being someone that was pre-diabetic and has a family history of diabetes, I do feel that balancing that blood sugar, because anytime it goes up and then it crashes back down, people tend to get cravings off of that too. So creating that stability within there has really, in my opinion, kept me on track for the long term and made it really sustainable.
Yep, that definitely, well, you're actually the one who got me to go high fat, a few months ago. And I did find it made all the difference in terms of I had been at, 95% carnivore, but just, those little cheat foods around the edges where you're keeping carbs or like little chocolate balls or whatever in, that kept me from the full healing and from the stability and all of the, like you say, just having that small percentage, but nothing could ever keep me from that craving, because I wasn't having the high fat. And then once I added that, I was like, oh, now I can really step fully into 100% commitment, and that's what has helped tremendously. So can you speak more to the healing that actually occurred? I mean, it sounds like you had a lot of hormonal issues, thyroid, pre-diabetic. How long and how did those issues resolve when you switched to full carnivore?
So a few of them really ended up and started in the beginning, like I said, I started during the winter time, and my asthma that I was having, I also ended up and had some cardiac issues. I really noticed those kind of right away. Um, because anytime being in Nebraska, when I would go out in the cold, it was like cold induced asthma. It was like my, bronchial tubes just ended up in spasm. And that started to really get better that first like winter that I ended up in transition. So it was, but it wasn't really bad. I was only on two inhalers for it. I say not bad, but it could be worse. It wasn't like I had to use them all the time. They were only the one was routine, but the other one was as needed. Uh, so those two things really started right away. The thyroid has taken a little bit longer. I'm still I just got my lab work back on that one, and the antibodies are still a little bit high, but they're the T3, T4, TSH, all of those are normal.
Mm.
The A1C is come down. Um, it's when I last had it checked, it was 5.0. So it's definitely down out of that pre-diabetic range. Um, the the hormonal, I started to notice those, I would say it's hard to really put because, you deal with it, but then you end up and you wake up and it's like, oh yeah, I'm not having hot flashes anymore. I'm not having night sweats anymore. I'm sleeping better. Um, so I'd say those probably took, a few months to end up and really truly balance out. But, you know, I I did. I dealt with, like I said, the night sweats, hot flashes. My sleep was out of whack. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, be awake for a while. Sometimes I'd have to get up and go to the bathroom. Um, Leg cramps, and all of those have ended up and got better now with doing, the high fat, and I do supplement electrolytes too. So
Mm. So I mean, you basically were going through when you had the hysterectomy, you were going through like more like what menopausal women experience. Like, so you were so young. I mean, because if you're only turning 40, you were 30, right? So, or before 30. So, is if it's not too much probing, but do you feel that the hysterectomy was that related to like your health and your diet for the reason for needing? I don't know much about that topic. So what is
I do feel, sorry to cut you off there. I do feel that so I had my children all within like a six-year period. I have three biological children. So between having those three children in 6 years, and then it was 2 years after my daughter was born, I ended up having a hysterectomy. And so I never lost the weight from them. And then I ended up and had the hysterectomy. And so it really all kind of compiled, and it just really started this downhill, spiral. But I was dealing with the diabetes and the cardiac issues. I did have some hormonal issues prior. I ended up on progesterone treatment when I was pregnant with my daughter. I actually had to have shots in order to carry her to term. So I was dealing with that. So I do feel it kind of started, but then, it all compiled, and I had the hysterectomy, and then it just really was already set off into that downward spiral.
yeah.
But things did progressively get worse with like the thyroid and those type of things after I had the hysterectomy and really through the hormones.
Wow.
Because like I said, it was a complete hysterectomy, so I don't even have, the ovaries or anything. So
Wow. And what was your diet like just kind of in your young life and into your adulthood before having your kids, and what did you eat? Did you eat sad
I
or
yeah, I grew up on the standard, sad diet. Loved my mom dearly. She did, she worked nights, so we tend to have things off of like the food truck. I don't know if people know of the Swan's truck. Um, we had a lot of like chicken strips, French fries, things that, frozen pizzas, those type of things. She did cook, the whole, whatever you want to call it, 5-course meal on like the weekends.
Mm.
And then you had the meat and the taters and the veggies and the carbs and, all of those type of things. So I did grow up on the standard, sad diet. But then when I started college, I took a nutrition class, of course, eat the food pyramid. So then it kind of made me a little bit health conscious of what I was eating. So I started to, kind of try to limit some of the processed foods that I was eating, eat a little bit more healthy. And that's kind of when things really started um, to get get on the whole, I'm going to try this approach, which was, the healthy, eat your greens, eat, those type of things. Because I was only in college for a couple years when I got pregnant with my first child. And of course, then, like I said, it really started the spiral, and I started looking at alternate ways after I had her to lose weight. And
and that brought
it
you to
just,
being a Weight Watchers coach?
yeah, yep.
I think it's so ironic because you're now like a MeatRx coach and you're like the high fat MeatRx coach, and Weight Watchers is all about like everything in balance and portion control and all this. And
Moderation.
now you're deep frying beef fat for breakfast.
I
It's
know.
like the opposite
I
world.
did. I went from, all the your 0 point foods on Weight Watchers of salads and chicken breasts and those type of things to eating the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Well, and that's what I think is really nice about your approach is that you find all these neat ways to get fat into the foods, but you make them really delicious. Whenever I'm watching your Instagram, I'm seeing the waffles and you kind of make these sandwichy things looking things out of everything always looks really good, like what is your thought on that? Because some carnivores say, oh, you shouldn't try to make your foods like non-carnivore foods, right? So why do you introduce these more, palatable, delicious types of foods onto the plate then? What's your
Be-
philosophy on that?
because a lot of my it's honestly, it's inspired through my coaching clients. I've had clients come to me and say, I can't eat, 6 tablespoons of butter, but yet, you end up and tell them to eat carnivore waffles twice a day or make, a smoked salmon sandwich using the carnivore waffle, or, I make it into like a little pancake bun type thing. Um, and they're able to do it and they're able to tolerate it. They don't get the stomach upset or they don't get the diarrhea from, increasing the fats and using the rendered fats. So it definitely, makes it a lot more palatable to them to be able to have the salmon sandwich. Yep, there's the salmon sandwich and the carnivore waffles.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So that was really just to help your clients to be able to incorporate the high fat in a delicious
yeah,
way. Is that kind of what we have a lot of
yeah,
metrics?
it was. And some people still connect the emotional tie with their foods to the former memory of the food. So like the waffles, they're expecting, this sugary, syrupy type waffle instead of, this other higher fat egg based type egg yolk, I should say, waffle. And so they're really putting a lot of emotion on the food instead of looking at it as nourishment. I don't have that tie to the food. I don't end up and look at food for, providing me happiness or providing me, comfort. Do I enjoy my, warm soups or, those type of things? Absolutely. But it's also, in my eyes, ways to get it in that, like you said, make it more palatable for the average individual. You end up and tell someone to sit down and eat a bowl of beef crack, they're going to look at me and say, you want me to do what? But I end up and I tell them, go eat these waffles for breakfast and they're good to go. Even though, it only has the egg yolks, the fat and stuff in it. They're a lot more receiving to that. So it's kind of bridging that gap or the transition, and providing them kind of a variety. A lot of people also, I know you end up and do ribeyes only, but not everyone can do that. And so they need a little bit of variety. And if that can provide them the variety that they're seeking, um, to stay on track and to keep that momentum moving forward to better their health, then, I'm all for creating the recipes.
Well, and that's what I love about you is that you actually do all of the experimentation until you get something that is really palatable. Because trust me, I was eating like 3 batches of your waffles per day for a while there, and they're delicious. And as you said, I think people want to. They may start carnivore and they go, "Oh, this person's eating ribeye only." And it's like, well, I didn't start there. This is like almost 22 months into this that I'm now, like as you say, as your mindset shifts from this is, you're letting go of all of the foods and the comfort and the emotions and the attachments, and then you're transitioning into realizing that food is fuel, food is medicine, and you're getting, but it takes time, right? You have to grieve and mourn, and sometimes people, I mean, I'm sure you have clients who probably stick with making carnivore bread and carnivore waffles and tallow sticks, and they probably are fine, right? I mean, there's no harm in that, right? It's just a different form to eat the food. So I think it's a huge contribution that you make to take the time. Like I had asked you, like, Becky, when are you going to come up with a tortilla, or a taco shell, right? And then you put yourself to task and you experiment until you get it right. So
Yep.
I think, one thing I wanted to ask you about is just, we know you, I mean, you're on so many meetings. We know that you're taking care of a lot of screaming children during the day, and you're always just completely calm. Your mood is so stable. You're like the embodiment of the Carnivore Zen. And I've seen you go through trying times, where there are tragedies, things happening in your life, and you still show up these meetings. You're still calm, you're still present, you're with people. So, can you speak to how your kind of, your from when you were probably very hormonal and going through like menopausal type symptoms after your hysterectomy until now? Can you talk about your moods and just your kind of, because I can't really imagine you anything else other than this. Have you always been this calm and centered?
No. I was very no. When I was more glucose fueled, I was very short fused, emotional. Something could be said wrong and I would end up in tears. My kids, would end up and kind of get the best of me, and I would end up and turn around and snap. Not that, they may just end up coming in the kitchen while I'm making supper and be like, "Hey, mom." And it's like, "What do you want?" And I snap at them. And so it was definitely the sugar, the glucose, the carbs, whatever you want to call it, that was creating that. And like I said, I ended up and was just very, I hate to say emotionally unstable, but it's true. And I did have a lot of emotional, issues, some depression, those type of things. I would end up and, like I said, for no reason, be crying or, just very insecure. Um, and the difference the carnivore has made, or that, removing those toxins and really fueling my cells in my brain with the fat for fuel, is just such a cleaner burning source. Now, with the higher fat and being as high fat as I am, I do stay in a deeper state, more of a therapeutic level of ketosis. And I do feel that also helps me um, keep that zen, because it doesn't, my body's not trying to really, I can flex between the fuel sources. But I tend to stay in that higher range. And it really helped heal the body and provide that zen of not being dependent on, where my next fuel source was coming from, or not being, truly adapted. And now I'm able to multitask. The thinking process is coming a lot clearer. I'm getting more done in a day. I'm just very structured in a routine. And I think that helps too. I mean, there's a lot of pillars, to our health that I've really had to focus on, but I do feel they all are a very important role in providing that zen too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you, taking a call, juggling a baby, and coaching a meeting all at once. And it's like you seem to just sort of effortlessly toggle between them without, like, I never have seen you get your feathers ruffled or anything, So, and when I hear, these crying babies, I think, oh my God, that's like my worst nightmare, right? I would just like be all nerves all day. And it's like, you have long days too, right? And I mean, don't you do a lot of physical work on your property where you live, right? I'm assuming it's not an easy, easy life in the winter in Nebraska, right?
Yeah. And that's what people end up and ask me. They're like, "Well, do you end up and work out, in a gym? Do you, get that type of exercise?" My exercise is, carrying these kids up and down steps, or, feeding the chickens, or for instance, this last weekend, I was pushing a wheelbarrow that was full of rocks, we raked them out of the drive, because when we had our drive, pushed the snow pushed out of it, they pushed the rocks out of the drive down into our yard. So we had to rake them out of the yard, load them up, and haul them clear up the driveway. And, so that's the type of workout that I end up and get in a day. Also just the standard like neat type, you know, walking around the house or standing versus sitting, um, making multiple trips instead of, really loading my arms up with stuff, making, maybe 2 trips out of it instead of just one giant one. Um, Instead of carrying, both kids up the stairs, I've started carrying just one and then coming back down, getting the other one, going back up. Um, those type of things just to get that movement in. Um, and it, like you said, it is a long day. I end up and I have daycare kids for 12 hours a day. I'm up at, 5 in the morning, and typically I try to go to bed somewhere between 9 and 10 at night.
Wow. But you definitely have
Yeah.
a lot more energy, right? And strength than, I mean, and I remember you saying that if you know you have a hard day ahead, then you will add more fat, right?
Yep. Yep. So if, for instance, tonight I ended up and had coaching session, I ended up and hosted meeting, and then we're having this. So I did end up and have, a little bit more fat to really provide me the energy and the push through. Um, but I don't, and I structure my day a little bit different than a lot of people. I tend to have my fat earlier in the day than so much late at night, because my body really, runs on that fuel. And so if I have it in the evening, in order to burn that energy off, it's like the body has so much energy that you have to do something, whether it's going for a walk in the evening, which is good, and, also helps on the glucose aspect, but it's just, it has that energy. So I have majority of my fat earlier in the day to provide me that energy. And then it also helps because the only fasting I'm currently doing is circadian fasting. So I eat from sun up to sundown, and then I keep a window before I go to bed, but it provides me the energy through the day, and then it still kind of holds over, but it allows my body to naturally produce that melatonin to for sleep. So I don't take anything to really sleep besides magnesium in the evening, but that's more of just for electrolyte balance.
Wow. So you're going strong all day, and then but you don't want to have so much surplus energy that then you can't go to sleep because you've got all this energy that needs to be used and discharged, right? So I
Mhm.
also see quite a few photos of you just like wearing relatively light clothing out in the snow. So it seems that you're cold, like you said, you're not having the asthma from the cold, but what about your cold tolerance? Has that also increased then?
Yeah, my cold therapy, my natural cryotherapy, as I call it, it has to the heat and the cold, which is why I'm sure you can probably see I did end up and get a little bit red being out in the sun. But I get red, but then it ends up and it turns into a tan. So typically I don't burn. It just, the initial ends up and turns red and it'll be tan. But the cold has gotten better. I end up and am able to get out, get that morning sunlight, get that good cold therapy in the morning. And what would have, bundled me up or kept me inside even because of those bronchial spasms, I'm able to tolerate, and I'm able to go out and scoop the sidewalks or, do whatever chores I need to do around the house outside in typically just, a sweater, or even, my sweatshirt when, like I said before, I'd be bundled up with stocking hat and bib coveralls and, my heavy coat and gloves. And I just tolerate it so much better.
That's a nice feature to have, if you're going to be living in Nebraska in the winter, right? And what about your husband and your kids? Are they carnivore or?
They may end up and have like the occasional, keto or carnivore meal. Like if we have steaks, they'll tend to end up. The other night my daughter ate 2 like beef fillet steaks. She's only 12, gonna be 13, and we ended up, and I thought we were going to have some leftovers, and here she's like diving into the steaks and ate pretty much about as much as what I would, but she's a grown kid. So, there's nights where we'll have that, but they're not keto, they're not carnivore. They have their food in the house. My son's a teenager. He'll go and he'll buy, the other sugar-filled foods, and I mean, he's still active. He's growing. He eats a lot of vegetables. He does eat a lot of meat. They are, pretty heavy meat base. But for instance, tonight, I ended up smoked a couple beef roasts today, and they ended up and had that. But they had asparagus with it. So, it was more of like a keto meal.
Mm.
Than true carnivore. But uh and then the daycare kids, they are more. I do have a few, like when I end up and make my salmon sandwich, I have a little 1-year-old that she likes to eat about half of my salmon sandwich, so I've started making, extra of it. Or even my carnivore waffles, they end up and they eat those. So there's,
So cute.
yeah, they are my little carnivores, but they don't end up, eating 100%. They end up eating, traditional, because that's kind of what the guidelines for daycares end up and say we have to feed them. So
Wow. Do you notice that when they eat your foods that their mood is better? Their behavior?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, they're definitely not cranky. They're not bouncing off the walls, So I do try to pretty much feed them meat and veggies and not a lot of processed foods.
Mm.
We still obviously have, snack time, and we'll do like cheese and meat and cheese. We do a lot of our own smoking of like meat sticks, and they have meat sticks for their snack today, and cheese and those type of things. So we do occasionally end up and feed them those type of things, and they are more well behaved. Um, they get along a lot better, but a lot of that also goes to providing structure and routine,
Mm.
keeping them on, the same routine. They know what I expect out of them, and what they can kind of, what and when they can do, whatever. So it provides the normalcy in our chaos, if that's how you want to put it.
Wow. So I wanted to ask you too just about your increases in confidence, because it sounds like before carnivore you sound like you were more insecure, more emotional. So would you ever imagine that you'd be, you know, coaching, leading on this carnivore community? I mean, can you describe a little bit more how your confidence and your that has improved over this time?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely ended up and improved. I never would have in my wildest dreams thought that I would end up, coaching for MeetRx, or coaching in regards to, like I said, I did the Weight Watchers. So I kind of, I wasn't the main leader of Weight Watchers. I just helped with it. I never, really wanted to be in that leader type role of hosting like the Weight Watcher meetings or anything like that. And so I always, kind of set back, and I was the person, behind the scale table, or, always took kind of a back seat, because I didn't I didn't want to do that. And since being with Carnivore and being with MeetRx, it has really, provided me the opportunity to not only keep myself accountable, but really end up and hear the inspirational stories. And that's what builds my confidence of, knowing that I to be that advocate, to be that voice, you have to be confident. And there's so many people out there that the lifestyle can end up and help them, and they don't have to be, 100% lion diet. There's other options. And there's, just being that voice and being that advocate. It does take a confident person because, you know, and I'm, there again, the data nerd side of me, um, constantly wanting to learn, constantly wanting to educate myself to make me a better coach. And that provides its own sense of confidence because, it provides me the knowledge to, if someone ends up and tries to, say red meat is bad, or, fat's going to give you a heart attack, I have that knowledge to be able to debunk, whatever myth they're trying to say. So that provides a sense of confidence too.
Yeah, you definitely, I mean, I've experienced you in so many meetings, and there's a lot of pressure because so many people are just, we literally just fire question after question after question at you. And it's like, you are such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, you've done all the research, you track and experiment on yourself, and you coach a lot of people. So it really is, it's so beneficial because, as you say, when people are new and they're doubtful, and they have all these fears and concerns around whether this way of eating is safe, whether it's going to help them, there's a big, puts a lot of pressure, I would say, on the coaches to represent the way of eating accurately and support people in a way where they don't get turned off and go, you know what, I don't think this is for me. Because you and I both know this is absolutely, the way we were designed to be fueled. And yes, there's variation within that. It doesn't, not everybody has to be eating red meat, not everybody has to be high fat. It doesn't really, but having that knowledge and being ready to answer. I literally have seen you where I'm like, poor Becky, she's getting like, this meeting has just been like 60 minutes of people asking her like, what about this, and what about this, and what about this, what about this, and I've been one of them. So that's why I really do admire that ability for you to just really, meet people where they're at and respond to questions with knowledge. It's clear that you've done the research and backed it, and you're doing it yourself. So it always gives that, air of authenticity and credibility, because you're also doing the same things to track yourself, and you're always trying to experiment and do better, right? Optimize, right? So then if people do want to book a coaching session with you, what can they expect just from your overall approach?
So I do go a little bit maybe more in depth than a lot of the coaches. I mean, I can do, the standard. I do have some coaching clients that I meet with every week. And we have, different aspects of not only our sleep, but did you end up and get the sunlight or the sunset, because that really helps with the circadian rhythm and the sleep. So not only looking at nutrition, but looking at all these stress management and, did you maybe end up and meditate or do some type of grounding exercise, really focusing on all the pillars so it can be as simple as people, just booking a coaching session of how do I, do a high fat approach, or how do I do carnivore, even just down to the basics of what is carnivore, clear into more of the accountability side and the more in-depth, as I call it, which is where, I do meet with them every week. Some of them starting out, I have met with a couple times a week, the beginning of the week and the end of the week, because going into the weekend tends to be when people struggle of, they're either going out, not knowing how to, deal with social situations, or what can I eat when I go out, or, I have family coming over, how do I do, X, Y, and Z. And so it can be, like I said, as simple or as in depth as the client wants to take it. And I end up and, kind of tailor it to the individual. Like I said, just because I end up following a higher fat approach doesn't mean that I'm dogmatic and thinking that's the way everyone has to do it. I work with several that are, able to do more of like an 80-20 or 1-to-1 even,
Mhm.
and do perfectly fine. Or those that, maybe want to do some intermittent fasting or even extended fasting. And, I work with those too. So that's the nice thing with being well educated and being, a cut, being familiar, I should say, because like I said, I did do fasting. And it is a good tool, um, depending where you're at in your journey. So like I said,
When
it's
I
very
like your
individualized, but
well, I like your additional I was very closed off to fasting initially, but then when you talked about fat fasting, I thought, oh, I could do that, right? And I just thought, oh, well, if I can still stay in kind of a fasted state, but eat some fat to kind of carry me through those. And I was able to start extending through that method until now I can go for longer. Not like I'm pushing it or anything, but I can go for much longer periods now without having to add the fat to make it through because it just gives you, like you said, with your tasty carnivore foods, it gives you those tools so that you can build toward wherever you're going to end up in terms of your best combination of factors and food. So I do like your holistic approach. Wanted to ask you about you. I know your Instagram includes essential oils in it, so what do you see as the role of essential oils in human health?
so it's more on like the medicinal side. So I started essential oils well before I ever started carnivore. I started it because our son had a skin condition. He ended up and had impetigo for he was a wrestler. Got it really bad. We ended up and did traditional medicine, from antibiotics to creams. We went to dermatologists. We went to, I mean, it was just, we cultured to see if, it was maybe staph or MRSA or, what was going on, and nothing would end up and heal it. And so this gal that I ended up and knew, she was an advocate for essential oils. And she's like, just give it a try. We ended up and tried it, and the difference that he ended up and seeing in a week, and there was actually two boys, and the difference they seen in a week was remarkable, and I was sold. um Now, there a lot of the lines go beyond just essential oils. I end up and use just the oils. I do feel no matter whether you are used, I use a pure source, I use doTERRA oils. um I do feel they can have their purpose, even though they are, plants. I've had a lot of people be like, but they're plants. Why are you using? And it's the oil that is extracted from the plant. So you're not eating the leaf, you're not eating the stems, you're getting the oil from that plant. Um, and it, like I said, it does have its therapeutic benefits, no matter whether it's aromatically, topically, or ingested. So I have kept them in there for that reason. I can tell you in the last, you know, several years, I have not been sick, and I do feel because I like to call my house a little petri dish with all the little daycare kids running around. Let's face it, they have their hands in their mouth, they're sneezing, they're snotting, you know, they they have germs galore. We've been very healthy. I couldn't tell you the last time I, had to go to a doctor because I was sick.
So are you
So I
using like the On Guard then? You use the On Guard
Mhm.
blend? And I've trusted in, I've done the doTERRA thing and same thing. I've seen lots of, like I don't know if you're talking about HD Clear maybe for the blend that helped your son. And I've seen the same thing, very resolution of a lot of allergies and skin conditions and boosting immunity. So I agree that there is a place for the plant, the extract or oil, whatever we want to call it. And I think, like some carnivores would say, oh, no plant anything. And it's like, well, plants do have medicinal properties, so
well, And you can end up, and one of the things that I do for skincare too, because a lot of the over-the-counter skincare products have toxins in them, and they can end up and alter, your body because of these toxins being absorbed through the skin. So I'll make my whipped tallow, but I'll make it into like a body butter and use my essential oil of rose or, jasmine, and even like toothpaste, for instance, that has fluoride in it, or all these other, you know, sweeteners and those type of things. They end up and they get absorbed even as you're brushing your teeth. You may swallow a little or just get absorbed through the mouth. And so I'll use like baking soda and salt, but then I'll end up and put like some peppermint or spearmint, drop of that on the baking soda. I've also made like a mouth freshener, and that tends to be, something I would recommend for people that are transitioning also, that may get what is known as like the keto breath or carnivore breath. It kind of is like dragon breath, using these essential oils, because instead of, the normal gum or breast strips or those type of things. So like I said, I do feel it has its place and its purpose, and it is a more natural alternative to some of the toxic shelf store-bought
I
products.
100% agree because I still have all of my doTERRA oils, and it's like the peppermint oil has gotten me through so much. It's like you say, the ketone breath when my mouth is just gross, a drop of peppermint oil, and then knowing that it's clean and well sourced, that it's not some toxic artificial something. I mean, the lemon oil, I use lavender if I'm going to take an Epsom salt bath. I like to put in drops of whatever my best, oils are. And so I totally agree with you that, it is a nice complement to having those other kind of medicinal healing tools, but just not eating the plants. So,
Exactly.
can people order through you if they do want to get some of those oils? Are you a doTERRA consultant
I
person?
am I am a advocate, and like I
Okay.
said, I have been an advocate for many years. I've actually made it to the executive
Oh,
state of doTERRA. Um, and I have a link on my Instagram in my bio that can end up and take you there. I also have a Facebook page uh, that the link is on my Instagram. I had stopped and think the link to my Facebook page is on my Instagram too. So
oh, great. Well, we'll definitely include that in the notes because I used to have my wholesale account and then I kind of stopped, but it's so nice. I mean, and the fact that you actually can help people in terms of what solutions they need. Like my mom, I got her on the Tri-Ease, the allergy blend of the peppermint, lavender, and lemon, and it totally helped her. And she was able to stop taking, I mean, she's not carnivore, so her allergies would probably potentially go away with carnivore, but she was able to stop taking all of that, Allegra, Claritin, and it's just so natural, and whatever antihistamine effect. So that is really nice to have in your toolkit. So that again is, I like your holistic approach. When I saw the EO, I was like, she has essential oils, so
yeah.
that's fantastic. So Becky, what would you say to somebody who's just considering trying carnivore? What advice would you give them?
Keep a variety, and also just give it 30 days, because that's what started me. Was I was just going to give it 30 days, and I seen the benefits. I felt better in just those 30 days, which continued me on. And it can be done. It even if you want to slowly transition, just start making the baby steps toward bettering your health, and really cutting out, the manufactured oils, the sugar, the grains, all the inflammatory things, and just slowly end up in transition. It's doable. Support, definitely jump over to MeetRx. There's several great meetings beyond just mine. The community is amazing. And I said it in one of the meetings today. they end up and help us coaches just as much as we help them. So it is like my little second family, you know. I end up and look forward to seeing them. When you don't see them for a couple days, you know, you end up and miss them like you miss your family. So
I agree, Becky, 100%. That's why I'm on a lot. I see you every day. And I agree. The MeterX community, just having that support is huge because this isn't necessarily the most mainstream, way of eating. I believe it will become a lot bigger with the number of things that it can just literally heal and prevent you from having to take medication and have all these health problems. I think there's no way that this word is not going to spread. So I agree with Becky. I think it's a great idea to just jump onto MeetRx. You can go on and have the support and the fun and the family, and we laugh and we cry and we just
we
have a
do.
really great time. And I think, it's like, why would you not want that in your life? And, it provides exactly what you need to help you on your health and healing journey. So, well, Becky, well, thank you so much for coming on to Confident Carnivore. You are definitely a beautiful, radiant, and shining example of the confident carnivore. So you are welcome to come back anytime in the future. And
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
yeah, and we will include all the links for how to reach you, essential oils, all of your pages, your YouTube channel, and everything. So Becky's a great coach, and when she's not giving away everything for free in the meetings, if you want some one-on-one time with her, it literally is only $17.99 per session. So she can Zoom you from Nebraska to anywhere in the world. And as you can see, she's the consummate carnivore with the Carnivore Zen attitude. And so thank you so much, Becky, and we'll see you next time. Okay. Have a great evening. Bye, Becky.
Bye.